Well, I'm really excited to welcome Cara Whitley to CMO Pulse today. Cara is the Chief Marketing Officer of Century 21. Cara, welcome. How are you? It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you. I'm well. It's really great to be with you today.
Fantastic. It's an exciting thing to meet new people. I think some of the reason why we're maybe embarking on this series is also to create reasons to do that when we can't be in the world. Cara, can you tell me a little bit about what your role has been like through a year of home and a year of the pandemic, and what's really shifted for you?
Yeah, that's a great question because it has been a really interesting past year from, I would say, highs and lows. When the pandemic first started, and first of all, I can't even believe we're talking about a pandemic. If we rolled back to, January of 2020 and if we all thought we'd be talking about a pandemic kind of stopping us in place, I think we would all think we were a bit crazy. Anyway.
And stuck in some really extreme box office, right?
Exactly. It is a bit like what movies are made of. Anyway, and now it's become second place, which is also really interesting. So, if we look at that kind of mid-March timeframe when we all sort of went home overnight and were said, oh, you'll be home for a couple weeks, which turned into 16 plus months. Overnight, things really came to a standstill in many categories. Ours, absolutely one of them. From our perspective, we had furloughs within the team. We really kind of stopped spending because we really didn't know what the world was going to look like and took a pretty conservative view because we wanted to make sure that we were being, fiscally responsible. And there was just a lot of unknowns in the world. And that went on for probably about a month and a half, because in a lot of states, real estate was deemed non-essential, and we wanted to make sure we were really helping our brokers. So we really went into a kind of mode of education and outreach and really just looking after each other. And then pretty rapidly, we started seeing this boom in home buying and selling. And luckily for those of us working in real estate, it's one of those categories. I feel like there's the winners and the losers within COVID, and there's certainly been categories that have been really hard hit, which my heart goes out to those categories. Having spent a lot of time in travel, I know travel's been a really hard hit, local restaurants, things like that. Real estate took off, last summer, just really, really caught fire and has not stopped since. So whenever I talk about those highs and lows, it's been a huge roller coaster for us, and a really exciting one at that, because you've watched this whole mindset shift of what people want out of their homes, where they want to live, people making huge life decisions in terms of just picking up and moving, second homes becoming primary homes, and just a lot of shifting mindsets and decisions that are being made. So it's been a really, really fascinating time. Our broker owners and agents have been having their best years they've ever had. So far this year, a lot of them are up dramatically year over year. So it's been a really exciting time for the Century 21 system and for home buyers and sellers, because a lot of people have, really improved their finances from a home ownership standpoint. A lot of people have really moved into a home that they've been dreaming about moving into and things like that. So it's been a really interesting roller coaster, and I think we're still on it, to be quite honest.
I think we're on it for the foreseeable future is probably what the safe bet is there. So how did you navigate all of that change? Because, you just talked about the world is going through this unprecedented thing. You're going through it personally. Your team is going through it. And then your consumers and stakeholders are just changing so rapidly. How did you stay close to your consumer and to your stakeholders and keep a pulse on what was happening in culture from a macro standpoint so that you could react and, be there for your partners when they needed you?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, really leading with empathy and staying in touch with people. I think that one thing that I think has been a huge silver lining with COVID is that we've had to be much more intentional about our interactions And I think when we're in person with people, you can be a little bit unintentional at times. I hate to admit that, but I do think that it was a little bit easier to have a chat and maybe not really focus on what you were saying or what the other person was saying, thinking, or feeling. And with COVID, I know at least for myself, I've really leaned into really listening even more and paying a lot of attention to other people's circumstances, situations, really listening to what they're saying and really thinking about everyone else's circumstances, because everyone's circumstances are different, whether that's other team members on your team, whether that's Century 21 system members or consumers. Everyone's on their own journey. Everyone's dealing with different things. And there's a lot of change going on. So really understanding how that's impacting people differently and then thinking about how to react to that. And I think that empathy and listening and really being intentional has made a big difference. And I think that that's a good thing. And I hope there's a lot of things from the pandemic that I hope that we keep and hold on to and don't forget about. But, they do say 21 days forms a habit, and it's been a few more than 21 days. So I do hope that a lot of that sticks around. And I also think we're much kinder to each other. So I hope that sticks around too.
Oh, I think you're touching on something that's really important that I want to accentuate, which is there was almost a humbling process of, I think at some level of seniority or experience, you have a sense of pattern recognition where you can maybe half listen because you've kind of seen something over and over. And I think the way that you're framing it of saying, hey, because everyone's experience was so different, because change was so pervasive and it showed up in different forms, you kind of couldn't take all of that for granted. You couldn't rely on what you know, and you really had to look with fresh eyes without that expectation. What else do you hope that we bring with us beyond the pandemic? And I know it's not over, but what are some of the other things that you hope that we deliberately keep with us that we have perhaps had to take on because it was thrust upon us because the world changed so fast?
First and foremost, the open mindset. What I have absolutely loved, I know that there's been a lot of challenges with the pandemic, and I don't take those lightly because I know a lot of people have been adversely affected. I choose to look at the positive things of it. I think it is such an exciting time to be in the workforce because overnight we were all together thrust into something that no one had any experience with. And it has caused everyone, different people deal with change differently. I'm someone who really loves change. But it's forced everyone to have this open mindset because we got into this situation that, was completely new to everyone. And I think that the possibilities are endless, and everyone has seen that you can accomplish things that maybe you didn't think you could, or you've understood that you could do things in different ways that maybe you didn't think that you could have before. So I think that there is an energy and an openness to things that we didn't have 16 months ago. And I really hope that that sticks around, and this what if mentality of, wow, we did that. What else could we do now that we know that we can get through something like that and actually be quite successful and quite resilient and drive a ton of growth? So the openness and the open mindset, I really hope sticks around, and I hope we don't fall back in our old ways. And I don't think we will, because I think that there's been a lot of really good that has come out of it.
Right. And to your point, we're so far beyond that 21-day threshold that surely some
yes,
of it.
we are.
So that ties into something that I want to touch on with you around the creative use of content marketing. So I think there was a pretty strong sentiment in our industry that whatever we used to be able to purely rely on from just a straight out advertising standpoint really got re-examined and reframed. Can you talk a little bit about how you've approached content marketing in the last year to 18 months and what's exciting for you in that work stream?
Sure. I think content marketing is one of the most important things we do. It certainly makes the rest of your advertising that much more successful. What we've tried to do from a Century 21 standpoint is really feature our own agents and bring to life those stories of how they've really gone above and beyond for their home buyers and sellers. in really unique and interesting ways, because we want to make sure that home buyers and sellers understand everything an agent does for them, because there's this interesting dilemma that goes on in our world, which is home buyers and sellers are using agents now more than they ever have, but they don't fully understand what a really great agent does for them throughout that entire journey. They still a little bit are in that mindset of agents opening and closing doors. And you often hear a home buyer or seller say, I just bought a house, I just signed the offer. That's when the work starts, is from that offer to close period of the journey of home buying and selling. There's up to 180 steps that happen from offer to close. And that's when your agent, a really great agent, really drives value for you. But home buyers and sellers don't understand that. We don't do it that often. We only buy or sell a home once every 7 or 10 years. It's often a quite stressful time frame, and it's a pretty fragmented journey. So that agent having a really strong realtor by your side is incredibly important. So what we do, especially from a content standpoint, is really bring to life those stories of how that Century 21 agent really delivers value throughout that entire journey in interesting ways to really help the consumer understand the importance of paying attention to what agent you choose and making sure that you really research that agent. What we found is consumers, when we used to do these things, and now we're starting to do them a little bit more, but when we used to go to dinner and take Uber rides and all those fun activities back in the good old days.
Distant memory.
Exactly. Consumers spend more time researching, a $40 or $50 meal than they do what agent they're going to use for the most expensive purchase you make in your entire life, which is crazy whenever you think about it. But it's just because that knowledge isn't there of how important that agent is and what happens from that offer to close period of the process. So that's one thing that we're really trying to bring to life and help highlight that importance for having a really strong agent by your side and bring to life the stories through content of a strong Century 21 agent and how our agents really go above and beyond and really pay attention to those details where others may not.
Well, it's one of those tricky things where when it's done incredibly well, you don't know about it to some degree. So it's kind of hard because if you didn't realize you had a great agent, you probably did,
Exactly.
So that was one thread that showed up very prevalently, in your data, in social media and in what was really becoming what was getting surfaced there. What was the role of digital channels and social media in particular in telling some of those stories from a content marketing perspective?
It has become increasingly more important because that's really the connection for the agent at the local level. And real estate is very much a local business in our agent's local market. So what we do is we make sure that anything we're doing on the national level can easily be implemented within each agent's local market. And they can easily just take what we've done on the national level and implement it right there in their local channels to make those connections through their social media. And we put out content each week on a very consistent basis because that consistency is important. So they can just plug and play that along with some personalization and make those connections in their local markets through social media. So incredibly important and has become even more so throughout the past 15, 16 months.
When you think about your approach, and it could be to new channels or just to marketing as a whole, do you view yourself as more creativity-led and data-inspired or more data-led or something either in between or different altogether?
I would say that the two work hand in hand. I feel like data provides that knowledge, and then the creative is really a product of our imagination. So those two things work really well together, because if you think about advertising that has that data behind it, it becomes so incredibly powerful because that allows us to customize those messages and then really hit those ideal moments that provides those connections for the consumer at that moment that they're ready to make a decision. So it really helps, especially, we were just talking about digital and social a minute ago. It really allows you to hit people at those exact right times with the right message if done correctly. So there are points in time where I think it's important to be a little bit more creatively led. And then there's points in time to really utilize the data in the background to help drive the creative. So I would say for me, it's really a blend of the two. And sometimes one takes a precedent over the other, depending on what your strategic objective is.
One of the big themes that surfaced, I'd say for society as a whole, and certainly across, digital and social, is this concept of purpose and brand mission. Now, you're, I know, approaching your 50th anniversary at Century 21, which is, going to be huge. And I'm sure you've been thinking a lot about mission and overall brand purpose. Can you talk a little bit about where you're at with that thinking and a little about where how you've approached that, particularly in the year that we've just had?
Absolutely. So I completely agree. We have a very clear mission, which is really about delivering an experience versus just a transaction. And in our world, that's really important because our world is so transactionally based. We call them transactions. And if you think about that, especially with my background coming from hospitality, if hotels thought about a hotel stay as a transaction, that would be a very different world than what we all know it as. So we're trying to really make that shift from buying and selling a home being a transaction to a holistic end-to-end experience. So when you work with a Century 21 agent, it really is about that holistic journey and really having our agents pay attention to those little details and being intentional where others may not be. And it does come down to those little details. If you think about an experience where maybe you've shared something with someone else that really stood out to you, it's typically tiny details that really made a difference. It's not usually some big grand thing that happened. It's usually small details that really stick in your mind and impress you. So that's something that we talk about a lot, is be intentional where others aren't and really go above and beyond on those small details. So it's really I say as simple and as complicated as that, which is going from transactionally focused to delivering an end-to-end holistic experience. So it's about delivering that extraordinary experience and just being intentional where others aren't. So that's really the heart and soul of our mission. And our mindset is about the relentless agent and that relentless mindset of always going above and beyond and always challenging yourself. So, asking yourself that what if question and how can I always elevate that quest. Those are some of our house habits, which are really our core values. And one of our house habits, whenever you talk about purpose, is expand the neighborhood. And that's really about ensuring that we have different perspectives at the table when looking at anything we're going to do, because you have to have different perspectives in order to have a holistic experience and a holistic brand versus just one viewpoint. So expand the neighborhood was something that we added within the last year and we feel very strongly about. We've actually just teamed up with a company called Project Destin, which is in underserved communities. And it's a little bit of kind of a Shark Tank type approach, but working with high school students to help them think about real estate as a career and looking at internships and possibly their own businesses, things like that, and really helping educate them in a team-oriented environment. So it's something we're really excited about that we've just started because we feel like we can help make a difference when teaming up with organizations like Project Destin. So that's one thing that we're doing, as well as making sure that we have programs for ownership within Century 21 and new agents who want to join us and people looking for a career in real estate, because it really is a fantastic career because you're kind of a master of your own journey whenever you are an entrepreneur and have your own business within a business.
That sounds like an incredible initiative. I'm sure there are some wonderful stories accompanying some of those different work streams.
There absolutely are. And like I said, we've just kicked off some of that work, so more to come, but we're really excited about it. We've also have a storied history with Easter Seals as a philanthropic partner, and Easter Seals touches so many people in different ways that that's something that we've been a long supporter of. So that's another kind of core element within our brand, is making sure that we give back. In fact, if you look at agents within their local communities, they are some of the biggest givers within their local communities, because it goes back to that local aspect of the business. And they are some of the absolute biggest supporters, whether it's with Easter Seals or just with their local charities, or throughout the pandemic, agents were the people there supporting their first responders, handing out food, helping hospitals, etc. So just huge community supporters across the board.
Changing the thread just for a second. So, you referenced that you'd been, you've worked in travel. I know you had a great role at American Express, and you began, early in your career in advertising with Grey. As you reflect back on your career, what for you has been the most influential decision that you've made that you feel has kind of propelled you to where you are now and this platform that you now have?
That's a great question. I think not being afraid to take risks and switch categories, to be quite honest, because as you said, I've worked in hospitality, financial services, I've worked at ad agencies, and really being able to shift between different categories does a couple things. One, it provides innovation and energy, but you can also pull on what you've done and experienced in different categories into your current role. And I think it provides some inspirational thinking combined with people in the existing organization who maybe have always worked in that category. So I think where the magic can happen is when you get that combination of people who have that long history and journey within one category, and then people who have switched categories for some new thinking coming in. So marrying those two things, I think, is a big plus within any organization. And for me, being able to thrive in multiple categories has always been energizing.
Well, it's because it's always the same consumer, right?
It is, absolutely.
You might be vying for a different slice of his or her brain or heart, but it's always coming at the same person. And if you could go back to the start of your career and offer yourself one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
That's a great question. When I first started, I never had a plan. One of the questions I always hated was, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? I'm not sure I still have an answer for that, to be quite honest. My strategy has always been make sure that I was working with people I trusted and respected and enjoyed. I think you have to have some fun while you're working, and make sure that there's a really interesting challenge to be solved that you're a part of. So that's kind of been my strategy and what I've looked for in roles. So I don't know that I have a piece of advice, but I would say maybe don't over plan yourself, but make sure you have some things that are true to you and stick with those. So I don't know if that's good or bad advice, but that's what I have always lived my life by. And I've been really fortunate to be able to work with really amazing people throughout my career.
I love it. With a lot of what I've asked you has been about what you're doing in more of an externally facing capacity. Let's turn and look inward for a second, because the role of Chief Marketing Officer, largely looks outside to your external customer, but I'm sure there's been a lot that you've been doing around internal communications and thinking about your teams. Can you talk a little bit about that piece of your focus and what that's looked like for you or potentially shifted in the last year or so?
Yeah, I think you just mentioned exactly what it's been, which is focus. One thing that I've really been trying to drive home is that notion of focus, clarity, and consistency. I think that one of the most challenging things to do is to say no to good ideas. So if you have that focus and really try to go deep on 2 to 3 things versus going shallow and wide, it will really allow you to move faster, deliver stronger results, and also drive that innovation, which lead to better results. Because when you are shallow and have too many things going on, even if they're the best ideas in the world, it'll be really hard to do anything well because you're a little bit too fragmented. So focusing is incredibly important, and ensuring the whole team understands what their piece of the puzzle is and everybody's driving toward that clear end result.
How do you chop down those 2 to 3 cool things, sea of amazing shiny pennies?
That is a really great question, and I think that it's a continual work in progress. Really being hard on yourself and having to say no to those great ideas, and looking at, dividing between what's going to drive the short-term results, and then what are some of your longer-term aspirations too, and being clear about, what percentage do you need to have that are shorter-term driven, and then what percentage is longer-term driven. And sometimes those ratios change a little bit, and that's okay. Just being clear on, are we more in a short-term phase right now? So then maybe 70-80% of your focus needs to be on shorter-term activities, but you still need a little bit of the longer term. And there's other points when maybe you're more in that longer term phase and less in the shorter term, but understanding those parameters will help drive what that focus is. And both of those are good. It just depends on what those other parameters are within the organization and what's going on within the economy and greater world too, that helps drive kind of what that ebb and flow is, because that's going to help drive that focus. If you're clear about, hey, we're in a bit of a shorter term mindset right now, which is absolutely fine, because that's a great skill to have too, versus we're really in a long-term strategy period right now. So getting that clear will help allow you to drive clarity on what those key priorities are.
Well, and there's a lot of conversation, particularly right now, about this tension CMOs are feeling between long-term brand building and sort of short-term deliverables and results. It sounds like you're kind of saying, well, gosh, do you prefer your left arm or your right leg? I think you're going to have to keep both, which maybe isn't the answer that we always want, right? But it is always a continuum.
It definitely is. And like I said, there's just different points in time when one takes priority over the other, and that's okay. Just being clear about kind of if you're focusing on your left or right arm at that point in time and going with it, because they're both really great things to work on, and you can dig into either of them. You just need to be clear on which one you're digging into at what point in time, and make sure your whole team's clear on that too, because what you don't want is half the people think you're very focused, you're all in on long term right now, and the other half or other quarter thinking, oh, we're all in on short term, because then you start to get a little bit of tension that's not healthy tension.
Have you adjusted any of your approach or anything that's in your toolkit with respect to communicating with your team and ensuring people are all on the same page? I think there's a certain amount of stuff that we take for granted when we're in person that we just certainly can't when everyone's on Zoom. Can you talk a little bit about what, if anything, changed for you with respect to communications with your team or the broader company?
Sure thing. I think what everyone's talking about is missing are the kind of water cooler conversations. And I'm not sure we even had a water cooler in the office, but you're still missing the water cooler conversations. So, I don't know that there's a good virtual replacement for that. However, I think it goes back to active listening and also making sure that we're reaching out to each other and really, really having those conversations. I think that that's going to change a little bit as we get into more of a hybrid mode, but over the last 16 months, intentionality, I think being really intentional about conversations and trying to pull people together has been incredibly important. But I do think that piece of the puzzle is lacking a little bit. And I think we've probably all become a little bit more siloed than we would like. So really trying to dig into that right now and figure out how to bring that back together a little bit. One thing we've done is try to have much better cross-functional working groups to try to merge different teams together a little bit more, because inevitably other conversations come up. and forced social virtual interactions, and those aren't fun. So trying not to do too much of that forced engagement, but also look for fun ways to have just good social chats versus entering a Zoom meeting and going straight into work. I think having nice social chats is a good thing. And one thing that I've absolutely loved about Zoom is it's made everybody a little bit more human, whether the dogs are climbing, the dogs are coming into the room and barking, or kids are climbing on people. I love that part of it because I think everyone's really shown their personal human side. And I think that that's been really cool. So I love that part of it. If I was to find something about Zoom that I really like. So yeah, I think that's been cool.
You can't sort of replace the things that you can't stop, right?
Nope.
And I think there's also an element of, the conversation around work-life balance and things like that, but it's, I know a lot of that conversation used to be a very sort of female-focused conversation, but, guess what? Your kids don't necessarily care whether it's mum or dad.
They don't. And, one thing that I always try to do too is I think it's so important for people to not just sit here at their desk and to get out and about. And I make sure that I've got a dog. I take him walking all the time. I take phone calls walking. I make sure people know that I'm out walking because I want them to know that, hey, they should do the same, because fresh air is good. Fresh air is really good. And one of the benefits of working from home is that you have a lot of flexibility. So do what makes sense for you when it makes sense to do it. So I think that flexibility can be really enriching for everyone. So I think flexibility is huge, and I've really tried to share that with everyone else and encourage it amongst everyone else. Doesn't necessarily help with silos, but hopefully it helps with people's kind of well-being.
Absolutely. And so you have your 50th anniversary coming up. I know you have an upcoming Nat Geo documentary that's very exciting. As you look ahead to the remainder of the year and beyond, what's top of mind for you? What's really exciting for you? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so you mentioned, I think we talked a little bit about the consumer changing mindsets, and we talked a lot about kind of our personal kind of changes that have happened in the last year and a half. And that's really at the heart of our Nat Geo documentary. Whenever you think about our category, which is all about home, 2020 has been labeled the decade of home. So what we wanted to do was really take the leadership in that and really help define what that next 10 years looks like. As we think about our 50th, we're really looking forward to the next 50 and really being a leader in the category in the next 50 with our storied past and our brand relevancy. We want to make sure that we have that forward-looking trajectory. So we commissioned a piece of research. We're the largest residential real estate brand from a global perspective. So being in 85 countries, we're able to go out and look at what's going on in the entire world. I mean, it's such an interesting time. This is the first time the whole world has gone through something together at the same time. So really trying to understand not only what home is now and how it's changed, but what that will be looking forward and what people are really wanting out of their homes as we look toward the future, because huge changes. Now the outdoor space is more important than the kitchen and the baths, where kitchen and bathrooms used to be kind of that key to what was in the home, and outdoor space has rapidly overtaken that. People need multiple home offices now. People, home gyms. There's all these things that 15 months ago weren't even in the lexicon for what people were looking for in homes. Fire pits, swimming pools. In the Northeast, you can't swim with a swimming pool. People are booked through 2023. So, the world has changed a bit. But with our research, we really want to have that forward-looking view on what's coming before people even understand it's coming, and how consumers are starting to look at that. So our agents will be armed with that knowledge whenever they're helping home buyers or sellers, because you don't just buy a home for the next year. Typically, you're really in it for the next kind of 7 to 10 years. So we're utilizing that research as the background for a documentary with National Geographic. Great partner to be partnered with, the most watched network and most respected network really out there anywhere with over 500, 600 million viewers. So a great partner to partner up with. And, you know, they just do such quality content. We talked about content earlier. We're super excited about working with them to really bring to life what the world's looking at whenever they think about home. And we'll also get the viewpoint of some of our brokers and agents, as well as Mike Meadler, our CEO, in thinking about kind of how Century 21's playing into the future of home. So that will come out in September, and we're really excited about that. And then we'll also have pieces of content from that that we'll use throughout our digital channels to help our agents connect with home buyers and sellers on the local level in their markets.
Well, that's incredible. And I mean, you know this, of course, but National Geographic routinely among the top social media moments of the week. So I'm sure there'll be a lot to come on that front. Well, such an exciting initiative and so wonderful to speak with you. Really can't wait to see what's next and to look out for that. I think we're all trying to figure out the future of home. So it's wonderful that you can help us piece that together as it unfolds. Terrific to have you. Thank you again so much for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.